So, in my practice and in some of my friends, in fact, I have observed that there is a thing that happens, and and it's often shown actually on video, movies, series like Grace and Frankie, where they talk about what happens when you're married and you end up discovering one way or another that you're a woman and your spouse is having sex with men. And what I noticed in a lot of the movies and television shows about what it is to be in that kind of a marriage and how that turns out, there is a lot of empathy for the guys that have maybe spent their whole lives in a closet. And I get that. And our culture is so historically, rejecting of anybody who is gay, more so gay men than gay women even. And so I understand the cultural, religious, and personal pressures that set these men up to marry in what appears to be a straight relationship with a woman who thinks that their spouse is completely straight. And what I've come to understand about that situation is that it's an extremely complex thing. I'm Melody Brooke. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I'm a marriage and family therapist, and I've seen in my personal life and in my relationships the impact that this kind of situation has. And I don't think people understand the psychological, emotional, relationship and financial even damage that comes from being involved in that kind of a relationship. And this is not at all coming down on people for being gay at all. It's more about just looking at the impact that happening to a marriage has. What I've seen is that it's very different for different people, and for some people it is extremely devastating. Can you imagine spending your entire life? There was one woman that I spoke to who was married literally for 50 years and had no clue that this was happening with her partner. And then suddenly she discovers the truth that her partner has been minimally, if at all, sexual with her, and acting out sexually by himself with strangers, people she obviously didn't know, and maybe even in some cases, people that she did know and didn't have a clue that's what their relationship was. And the sense of betrayal and loss, and the fact that you spent your whole life believing one thing and discovering that in fact your life was something entirely different is an indescribable kind of pain. It causes such intense damage that many times these women deal with not just the loss of their relationship, they lose often the loss of their friendships with other people who maybe don't believe them, because sometimes even when the men are doing these things, they deny that they're gay. They deny even that they're bisexual. They will say things like, well, I'm straight. I just like to have sex with men. And I understand that. I've actually seen people on TikTok and on YouTube discussing that as a topic. I've seen articles about it where men who consider themselves 100% straight have no supposedly desire for or attraction to other men will have sex with men. And I'm having a little trouble with that concept, just because I personally can't imagine not or wanting to have sex with someone who I didn't have an attraction to at all. I don't see how that happens, because we already know that so much of our sexual activity happens in our brain that if there's not that sense of connection, that sense of desire, that sense of attraction to someone, we're not gonna respond sexually to another person. All the studies kind of indicate that, and yet there is this whole section of men out there declaring that this is the truth. Find it fascinating. And maybe the truth is they're bisexual, and that's okay. It's okay to be bisexual. It's okay to be gay. It's okay to be straight. It's okay to be whatever gender, sexual expression that you have. I mean, we're all human beings. We are all so unique in our expression of our personalities, our self, of who we are. And the frustrating thing is that what I have seen happening in these marriages where you discover that your husband is behind your back having an affair of any sort, whether it's a gay relationship or a heterosexual relationship. If you discover that your partner is not being faithful to you, this is a huge traumatic betrayal. I don't care what sex they are. An affair is an affair. Cheating is cheating, regardless. So there's that piece of it, but there is a unique piece that I don't think is fully understood or talked about, and that is that the women who are at the receiving end of being in a relationship where their husband has been cheating. And I'm not even going to, I'll talk in a minute about those husbands that come out and talk to their wives about it before they actually do anything about it. That's a whole different subject. But the men who keep it a secret or who are doing these supposedly male on male relationships where they're supposedly straight, having sex with other straight men, that kind of cheating, of course, creates a whole different dynamic, because part of what happens is a lot of times the women, I mean, they love their husbands. They're in love with their husbands, and they want to be understanding, and they want to embrace all of who their husband is. And so sometimes there is a delay in discovery, and that time period between that discovery and when they actually end up either ending the relationship or the husband leaves or whatever. But there's a period of time sometimes in between where there is a lot of confusion and pain and overwhelm and emotional and physical numbing that happens because you're trying so hard to be empathetic and understanding and embrace this new reality of who your partner that you thought was your partner only is now partnering with other people sexually, sometimes romantically, and that you have had a whole different idea about what your life together was or is. And so women who are trying really hard to be empathetic end up, trying to go along with for a while. Maybe they go along with going in situations where they're with their partner while they're having sex with another man, or they encourage them to go out on their own and they stay at home while their husband is going out. And, that's a whole different mindset. And I do know that there is a whole faction of the world of polyamorous relationships where you experience your relationship with your partner as primary, but then you have other loving sexual relationships aside from your primary partnership. I do know that happens, and some people are happily doing that. I also know that's extremely complex and doesn't always work out the way that either partner hopes that it will. That's a whole other subject. But some of these women end up making an effort to be open, either having one side open, having their husband having their side open with another person, or they decide to go ahead and have both sides open. But what I have discovered that the majority of the time, these men are not honest. And that is where the real problem is, because they are lying not just to themselves, well, not just to their wives, they're also lying to themselves about who they are, what they want. And I know that part of that has to do with wanting that typical culturally acceptable marriage relationship where you're seen as a team and you raise kids together and you go on vacations together and you have a life together, and wanting that to be your plan and your dream for your life. So they feel compelled to stay with this person. Maybe they even love their partner. Maybe even they love their wife, but they're cheating on their wife the whole time. And sometimes, of course, they're even putting their wife's and their own life in danger by doing risky behaviors like having sex without condoms and putting their wife, unbeknownst to her, putting her own life at risk by continuing to have sex with their wife. There are some situations where the wife doesn't understand why her husband doesn't want to have sex with her, and she's going through years and decades, perhaps, of thinking that she has failed him somehow, only to discover that he had no interest in her. And I can't even begin to tell you the kind of devastating experience that is for a person who has spent their entire life trying to live up to something that they can't be. And then there's those partners, and this is a large portion of them, I believe, who are so angry, perhaps they even love their wife, but they are so angry that she's not a male and cannot provide them the satisfaction for their sexual desires in that realm. They actually end up treating their wives with contempt and misogynistic reactions to their desires and their expressions of themselves, and they end up really being emotionally and perhaps even verbally abusive to their wife because they're so angry that their wife is not a man. Like there was anything the woman could do about that, right? I mean, I guess you can today, but what if she didn't want to? She's happy being a woman. So it's a very complex thing, and I don't think people fully understand how incredibly painful it is to walk into a room, turn on your computer, and see a photograph of your husband naked advertising himself to other men for short hookups, for anonymous hookups even. And to know that this person who you had devoted your life to, you had given them every bit of your trust and faith and adoration and partnership and worked through stuff together and battled over hardships together, and then discover that that person has completely destroyed what you thought your life was. And in fact, your life was not what you thought it was. And the loss and the pain that comes with that is huge because, when you do love your husband, you really want to make them happy. You want them to be happy. And then you discover that you can't do it. You cannot make them happy. You are not the genetic gender person that they need to feel fully satisfied with their life. And I don't want to make it out that I think these guys are all covert narcissists, although some of them are. Some of them are overt narcissists. But that's true in every marriage, right? But I do see a pattern that these men who fail to allow themselves to be who they really are, and they go into a marriage, some of them know beforehand, some of them don't, some of them discover it after they get married. But in any case, they develop a part of them that is willing to lie, to deceive, to pretend that they have a normal heterosexual relationship when in fact they don't. And there's lots of religious and cultural reasons for that, but the interpersonal impact of that, the interpersonal piece of that is really where the damage is. Because if you are continuing to deceive and pretend that you are one kind of person. You have one identity, one part of you that lives in this, normal, typical heterosexual situation. But there's another part of you that's living in a world of deception and betrayal and lies. I can't even imagine the splitting that would have to occur inside of a person to be able to maintain that, and the amount of psychological energy that it must take to maintain that, especially over long periods of time, the way some of these people do. And what ends up happening is they become so blocked from their own awareness of what they need, what they're feeling. Their integrity is so broken that they deny parts of themselves so fully that they're not even connected to their own feelings about what's happening with the partner that they say they love. And the truth is, in order to really be fully in any kind of relationship, I don't care if it's a friendship or certainly if it's a marriage, that if without being honest with yourself, you're not going to be able to be honest with your partner. And that dishonesty is a travesty when it comes to spending your life partnership with someone. And and I'm also talking about men and women, believe me, I see it both ways, who deceive and have affairs, and that goes on for decades with them, and their husbands find out. I mean, it's devastating. But again, this betrayal that happens when you're a wife and your husband is having affairs with men, cheating on you with men, and pretending that they're not for decades on at a time, the devastation that happens when we experience that is even bigger. Even though I do know and understand, and I've worked with plenty of women and men who've experienced that kind of trauma of betrayal of a heterosexual kind, but what I've seen is that there is such contempt of the women that even in divorce, even in the best situations where a woman is fully accepting of her husband as being gay and says, okay, well, we will just have this as a partnership to raise our children together, to build our finance structure together, and we'll just go forward in life like that. And this, they're still each other's best friends. Well, then one day he falls in love with a man and then leaves her and is contemptuous and angry and bitter and mean to her in leaving. And I don't know if it's their guilt that causes that. I suspect it may be that they have to decide that they can't have any feelings for the person that they spent maybe 20 or 30 or 40 years with, that they have to just reject that person and see them as the bad guy in order to justify their own actions. I don't know. But I do know that this kind of a situation has not been fully addressed in the media. We haven't really given those women a voice. And it's something that I am actually working on developing. And if you know anyone in this situation where either they're living with this partner who is having sexual relationships with the other male partners, having relationships with other men sexually, or they're divorced and had that experienced, or and I'm even interested in talking, and I know that the younger generation may be way more accepting of this in so many ways because they have been culturally not as conditioned to seeing life just simply as a heterosexual partnership throughout time. They have a little bit more open attitude about it. I really would love to hear from some of those women too, who are in a relationship perhaps where they're open and accepting. I do know that that sometimes those divorces happen in a very loving way, and that's awesome. And even they develop a kind of a best friend relationship that continues forward in time, and that's beautiful. But that is the exception. That is not generally how it goes. And it's interesting because it's not just women of my age where, you think, well, when I was getting married the first time was, a while ago. And culture was very different, and the acceptance of gender and sexual experiences was quite different in those days than it is now. There's a lot more openness and acceptance and of who we are and who we express ourselves to be, which I think is a fabulous thing. But I noticed that it's still happening. There's, of course, pockets where culturally and religious wise it is just not okay, and so that it is still happening today where men know they're gay and marry a straight woman anyway without disclosing to her, or who get married and start having sexual relationships with men without disclosing to their wife. These things happen, and when these things happen, the effect is extremely traumatic in so many ways. And I think a lot of it has to do with that misogyny that comes through. And that is not something that's normally talked about. So I am in the process of gathering up self-taped videos where women are telling their story about what they experienced as a wife of a man who is gay or is in having sexual relationships with men, or their ex was gay or had sexual relationships with men outside the marriage. I want to hear those stories. I want to invite you to become a part of my Estranged Women page on Facebook, a group on Facebook that is a private group. So you'll have to message me and I'll give you the link so that you can find the group. And if you know someone who's in that situation or has been in that situation and would like to tell their story, I will provide as much anonymity as possible. I can, if they don't know how to, shadow their own face so they're not recognizable, there are ways that I can do that in editing, and I can also distort the voice so that you don't have to reveal who you are, and so that you're not outing people that perhaps to create chaos and conflict in your family. Don't want that. That's not the point. The point is to tell your story. So if you know someone, or if you are someone who has experienced this or is experiencing this kind of a situation, this is a story that needs to be told and understood. And again, I want to say it has nothing to do with wanting to see a man's choice in their sexual preferences being criticized in any way. Is not about that. It's about that experience that the woman has when she's involved in that relationship, so that I can help people to start understanding not only the impact that they if you are a man in that situation, the impact that it has on the woman you say you love, and also to help women feel not so alone, because when we go through this, there is an incredible sense of you're dealing with this by yourself, and you want to help your husband by keeping his secret. You don't want to out him because you love him and because he has a relationship with your children and your family, perhaps. It's very complicated, very, very kind of a unique situation that the story needs to be told. So I'm Melody Brooke. I'm a licensed professional counselor, marriage and family therapist. I'm a mom, a grandmother, a screenwriter, a filmmaker, and I would love to hear your story. So if you have that story, you can message me, and I will get you connected to the Facebook group where you can learn how to share your story with me so that we can put this documentary